in a lot of ways, we can achieve anything that we want if we believe that success is a choice and not luck. That perspective is always helpful in the midst of being in a sea of instability and rejection. That is our fabulous industry. This is my moment to do that. This isn't about getting a job, but to do the thing that allows me to express myself.
Hello and welcome to the Theater Art Life podcast, sponsored by ClearCom, the leader in voice communications for theater and the performing arts. Call your cues with the simplicity and elegance of ClearCom Intercom solutions. The Theater Art Life podcast puts the spotlight on those who create live entertainment around the world, the culture creators and the backstage masters.
My name is Anna Robb, and today we're talking with Joshua Morgan. Joshua is a proud graduate of the University of North Carolina School of the Arts. A diverse singing actor, his regional credits include roles at Woolly Mammoth Theatre Company, Arena Stage, Theatre Under the Stars, Folger Theatre, Triad Stage, Signature Theatre, Olney Theatre Center, North Carolina Theatre, amongst many others. He was last seen in the Broadway musical Ain't Too Proud, The Life and Times of the Temptations, having originated the role of legendary manager Shelly Berger. Before that, he had most recently finished production on NBC's upcoming series, Lincoln. He is currently developing stories for TV and streaming content, and there's probably more you need to tell me because that was a while ago, this bio. Joshua also founded and runs a company called Artist Strategy, whose goal is to help freelance creative entrepreneurs develop strategic business plans and work towards a sustainable future in the arts. Joshua, welcome to the show.
Good morning.
So excited to have you on. I'm really good. And, I've been trying to get you on this podcast for, God knows, probably 12 months already.
I quite literally was like, can I talk to you on your podcast? Because I love connecting with you.
Exactly. And I'm in much admiration, as we just spoke offline, of your work and what you do. So let's get into it. But before we get into your work and your business and stuff, tell us, where did you grow up and what was the path that brought you to the stage?
So I was born in England. That's where half of my family's from. And I went back and forth there when I was a little kid, but really spent the bulk of my time in Los Angeles and then moved to the East Coast. And actually, it really wasn't until I moved to New Jersey / New York where I sort of saw my first Broadway show when I was, 12 years old, and that was it. And I was in my on-off Broadway show a year later when I was about, 12 or 13 at the time, and then for the rest of my life, it's been stuck with me. It hasn't been able to shake me off yet.
And your parents, were they theatrical going people, or is that something you kind of is an outlier path for your family?
Yeah, not really. I'm an only child. My father, he had a real struggle with drugs and was not a legal citizen. So he was deported actually when I was 8, which I'm guessing shaped a lot of my creativity because I spent a lot of time alone. Not that I was a complete loner, but it was just me. And my mother was very young and was working to raise me. And she's very much an entrepreneur, but not in the arts, although I would argue that entrepreneurs are inherently creative people. So she definitely inspired me a bunch. But I sort of stumbled into, I just wrote about this, speaking of, we were talking about the blog earlier. I just wrote about this because I think this is true for a lot of people, but the arts in all of their various forms, but for me as an actor, sort of became my one consistent family and still is to this day, honestly, the one mainstay in my life. I love my family very much, but to be honest, it's been a in and out experience over the past of the years,
That's really interesting that you say that. I think that's what draws a lot of people to the theatre, is that sense of community and family when you start a show. It's also quite heartbreaking too, right? Because you begin and you go for a run, and then when it closes, it's not that you lose that family, but you lose that day-to-day relationship that you have with that group of people. So there's a lot of many beginnings, middles and ends in our industry, and that's quite an emotional roller coaster for some.
Gosh, I talk a lot about how what a wild ride this industry is, but I don't always necessarily think about it that way too, which is it's exactly that. It's like these deep connections that we form and then can be gone in a matter of moments. I just did a workshop of a new show, I don't know, about a month or so ago now, and we bonded so quickly in the 3.5 weeks, and then it ends, and these people that you every day have to trust so implicitly, it just kind of goes out the window. That is another ding against us, which makes us so resilient.
Exactly. It's totally. Do you think that your mother, being an entrepreneur, gave you that sense of business sense that runs parallel to your artistic career?
Absolutely. My mother, even though she has two half sisters, I would argue, is also a bit of an only child or a loner in her own right, very independent. She emancipated herself when she was 17, because her mom, not to be so dark, but just to give context for this, her mom was killed when she was 12. And I think it really set her on a path of her own sense of independence. And I've seen her, though, Anna, this is what's kind of amazing to me, reinvent herself over and over and over and over again. She partially went to college, but never got a degree. And next thing you know, she was head of running marketing for A&E, and then decided to drop that career, become a yoga instructor, and started several studios. And then then left that and got into politics and started working for the mayor of Newark, New Jersey, and has constantly reinvented herself. And I said this just a little bit ago, but there's incredible creativity in that, in trying to problem solve. Okay, I want to do such and such. What is it going to take? Which is the simple question that I've seen her ask herself over and over again. And, not to be too frou-frou, but that's a very powerful notion that in a lot of ways we can achieve anything that we want if we believe that success is a choice and not luck, because we just sort of go into the process of acting, learning from those actions, and then continuing to analyze and improve on whatever we're doing. If that makes any sense. I've been thinking a lot about that concept, which is why I'm throwing it out there.
No, it's really interesting. And for those who don't know what Joshua does on the side of his career, he runs a company called Artist Strategy, and he coaches people on how to build a career and a sustainable career in the arts. And I wanted to ask, do you discuss that with your clients, that the concept that success is something that you choose to have rather than, there are elements of luck. You might need to be in a particular country to have a better chance on Broadway, right? Like an American's going to have a better chance at Broadway than somebody on the other side of the world, just from the pathway. But you can make decisions to get yourself to America and into the Broadway circuit if that was a thing. It's just some people's mountains are higher to get to that point, or their starting base plate is different,
Well, you're bringing up something very, very important, and it's a truth. But here's the deal. For anybody, for any of us, whether it's we want to make a pie or we want to be on Broadway, there is a cost associated with achieving that thing. And here's the truth: that none of us are created equal when it comes to circumstances or mindsets or abilities. And what that means is that it's going to cost something different for everybody. So if we if we can accept that, okay, this is might cost me a little bit more or a little less, and just know what that is, that's pretty powerful, because that, paired with the idea that achieving something is a choice and not luck, knowing that there's simply just a cost, per your point, is pretty powerful. I say this because a lot of times we can bemoan our circumstances as well. And I do think this comes up a lot in the arts in particular, as though someone's taking something away from us, as though, other people have all the power. And so much of what I try to focus on for myself, but also for folks that I work with, is getting rid of that notion that these people have this power over us, because I call bullshit, because not only do they quite literally not, but there's no structure to this industry. There really isn't. I mean, it's the wild, wild west in a lot of ways. There really is
totally
no,
is.
In terms of like maneuvering, getting in. If you want to produce,
There's no linear trajectory of your success in this industry at all.
Exactly. I think it is just a really good point, which is, and that gets to this idea of mindset of like, if you believe in what you have to offer, and you have the ability to sort of to hold on to that and to sort of stay open to this, again, the simple idea of cause and effect. Action creates reaction. Where do I learn from that reaction? How do I change my action subsequently? I truly believe success is inevitable. And I swear I'm not like on some like The Secret. I mean, I'm not knocking The Secret. I'm just saying this is like 2 + 2 = 4 if we can harness whatever that is.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast the other day and I found a really interesting analogy, which I thought was on point, which kind of relates to what we're talking about. And they were saying that it's one of the baking shows. I don't know what baking show because I don't watch those things, but there's a competition where the chefs get a box of ingredients and they don't know what it is, right? And then they open it up and they have to cook an amazing dish with it. And one chef gets everything to perfectly make a filet mignon, and another one gets like something that's completely in the too hard basket to try and make something nice, and yet they're all competing on the same playing field. And it's the same with us. Everybody gets their ingredients, which is their circumstances, their culture, where they grew up, what their financial situation, all of these ingredients. And it's what they do with them that makes them. And if anything, the person that starts as the underdog with the ingredients can often make the most inspiring thing, because they've got to be more innovative with what they do with those ingredients rather than somebody who has an easier path with the premium ingredients. And I thought that was a really interesting analogy, because I've been thinking about that a lot, because I work a lot cross culturally and I work with people from all different parts of the world, and I'm constantly taking a reality check on my own culture and my own upbringing and my own personal situation, because I have to remove that lens and I need to understand their lens in which they view the world, so we can work collaboratively in a creative environment. And it's a beautiful challenge, and I learn about myself in each and every project when I move overseas, when I travel overseas.
Well, yes, and yes. And to that last part about learning, I will say one of the biggest benefits, one of the selfish benefits of me running Artist Strategy and working with, I've been running it for close to 10 years now, and learning so much from so many artists of so many backgrounds about their processes and mindsets. And it really is incredibly motivating for me. I often say to Mike, who runs Artist Strategy with me, we're offering a service, and yet sometimes I feel like we're the ones winning out because
you're learning.
Yes, it keeps me in the game. It's and also puts things in perspective. This idea again about haves and have-nots. I didn't come from tons, but there are people who come from far less who work even harder, and that perspective is always helpful in the midst of being in a sea of instability and rejection. That is our fabulous industry.
Totally. So, what's the balance in your own personal life of running Artist Strategy and then taking on your own projects? So, that seems like you have a full life. So what's the decision making on how much time you spend between that business and your own career performing? I mean, that's part of your career, of course, but your actual on-stage career.
Yeah, that's a good question. It is a difficult balance, to be 100% with you, and especially because for the bulk of my time running Artist Strategy, it's been one-on-one consulting. Now, as you could imagine, that is difficult to scale, and it is also difficult to manage from a time perspective when I am in rehearsals or I am shooting, and I have got to be flexible with my schedule. So that is where considerations in terms of other people, coming on like Mike, and we now work with another great artist, entrepreneur, Hassiem Mohammed. And So that's a consideration, is obviously taking away some of the workload, but also changing the modes in which we're eventually going to offer our work in terms of e-learning courses and in group coaching is where we're probably headed. But then in terms of your question about how do I manage the time, that's it's a ever shifting tectonic plates in terms of navigating how, okay, I'm in rehearsals for 8 hours a day, which means I'm typically going to coach very early in the morning or until later at night. And that's what I've taken on for myself. I will say, because I am a big believer in the growing of a secondary income stream for most freelance artists, that it has to meet 5 key criteria. One is that it's mobile, flexibility of schedule, flexibility of income, that it's something that you can be passionate about, and that it is scalable. And I share that because when I'm not working, it is a time for me to then go to accelerate a little bit to control my own level of income and also to grow the business closer to that scalability that will give me eventual more freedom in all of this.
And now a note from our sponsor. The Theater Art Life podcast is proud to be sponsored by ClearComm. ClearComm is the leader in voice communications for theater and the performing arts. From the Broadway stage to the West End to Cirque du Soleil, ClearComm brings seamless communication solutions to your stage. You can find them at ClearComm.com. Go check them out.
That's super interesting. When you said that you coach people in finding a secondary stream, do you help guide them in finding what that might be for them, and like encouraging what that might be that they would like to do on the side? Is that part of your coaching sessions?
It's a big part of it. Everybody is totally different. Sometimes people come in and they've got either things that are pretty solid and they've been running, and we look at refining and ways to make sure that it flows with the rest of their work. Some people, it's a wholly new concept. They've been doing gig work forever, or nannying or bartending. The reason why I think that those are risky secondary incomes is because you kind of constantly reinvent the wheel. You go away, you do a gig, you come back, you might not have that same job. You're constantly looking at having to renew. So you're already running another business. Just I posit that, having one that's completely in control, that under your control, that you can be doing in years is the most valuable. But yes, a lot of times we have to go through the ideating phase of what are your skills, what are your interests, what are some of those ideas that you might have, and then how do we look at even begin to budget them out and to do maybe some market research to see if there's a real interest in what this idea is. Anna, when people often come to work with me or us, at the outset, everyone's so gung-ho, right? Oh my gosh, I can achieve it all. They look at their plan. We have our plan, which this 5-year plan where they see their goals and like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. And yes, I'll run this business where I schedule only actors as babysitters, and I'm going to be the point person, and everyone's going to give me 12% of whatever their idea is. And then 7 weeks in, when push comes to shove, and they're tired one day, or they've been rejected from, 3 different jobs. This is when that headspace and mindset comes back into play too. It's wild to me. I mean, you're an entrepreneur, and I was saying to you before we started recording, I've in the brief time we've known each other, I'm just so blown away by so much of what you create for yourself, and I assume your family, and also us. I mean, this community. I say that because that demoralizing, some might even call it rock bottom feeling of whatever the effort is in your world that you're working on, whether it's epic or, starting a podcast or growing Theater Art Life, whatever the project is, there are hills and valleys. But the difference, I think, for true entrepreneurs in a lot of ways is how you overcome whatever that questioning, nagging thought is. Can I do this? Is it worth it? Should I keep going? And I guess one of the things I'm sort of that does make artist strategy uniquely difficult is we're exploring if you can actually cultivate an entrepreneurial spirit, because a lot of people will talk about it being something that's a bit innate. And one of the things that's obviously true for our industry, we understand the idea that we're businesses, kind of, but I think we sort of sometimes put that into the idea of a hustle. We're just hustling around and trying to make it work, which to me is not what an entrepreneur ultimately is.
It's more resilience than it is hustle, right? I think that's being able to work through those down moments is the way through, and that's not easy, even though I've done it for a long time. There's days where you're like, you want to scream, but I know it's really interesting that you ask yourself, can it be taught? Because I don't know if that's always been innate in me to try and overcome those things. I think I am stubborn by nature, but I also find that the people that stay around me on the long haul for running the company and working with me are of that kind of innate nature too. Very hardworking, very resilient, and being able to pick yourself. I always remember when I used to call shows, when you make a show call, major mistake in the show call, and I think this is where I trained myself to drop, because the problem is if you're getting all worked up about the mistake you made, you've still got to call the rest of the show. So if you don't drop it and get over it, you're going to muck up the rest of the show, right? So there's this sort of thing where I've had to tell myself when in the middle of a show call, drop it, stop thinking about it, Anna. You're only going to make things worse if you don't move on from it now, And I think that's that innate training. I've show called for 20 years. I've had to tell myself that so many times, and I think that's come out of my show calling and into my real life. Just drop it, move forward, and go into the next thing. And it's funny what environments that you get put in that force that evolution of your own innate nature. And I wonder if you can put people in environments where I don't know if you can fabricate that environment, but you have to get themselves where they get hit, and they have to get themselves up, and they get hit, and they have to get themselves up. Is that the way you think is that you would approach it if you're going to teach them, or is that a conversation you have with them?
Yeah, we talk about putting ourselves in the line of fire, creating adversity for ourselves right away. I mean, and one way we do that is by starting from a place of action. What that means is I'm a big believer in failing fast, in learning from doing. I think thinking kills ideas. I'm just a very action-oriented person. One, because the industry moves so fast. I mean, Anna, I don't know the ins and outs of your career, but we've all had those moments where all of a sudden our lives changed in the blink of an eye. And this industry has the ability to do that. When I did my first Broadway show, I mean, when I tell you, it was 8 days between me living in a different state when I was running a theater company, and next thing you know, I was in rehearsals in New York, and my life was completely upended. But I say that because, well, that also permeates that luck and fantasy thing that sometimes we hold on to too much. But also that just speaks to how quick we all move. So anyway, to your point about being in the line of fire, absolutely, we've got to fail as fast as we possibly can in order to develop that resilience. But that is easier said than done, right? Because one of the unique things in this industry in particular that I think is different, which makes us, I think, even more, I'm going to say, valiant entrepreneurs, is that our work is us. So it's not like we're selling, colored shoelaces or coffee mugs. We are what we're trying to put out there. Therefore, when we fail fast, and it feels like a reflection of our person, as opposed to going.
I never thought about it that way, but it's so true. Yeah, absolutely. And as a backstage person, I have even more empathy for people who are on stage, because you can be rejected not because you can't sing or not because you can't act, but because you just don't look the part, right? Or they don't want that look for that particular role, or they don't, for whatever reason, you're competing arbitrarily against 50 other people, and one of them is going to get the role and the rest are not. It's just such a ruthless, really, environment as far as I can see.
I often say to people, I'm like, let's objectify ourselves before the industry objectifies us.
Yeah.
Right? Let's get really clear about what, and it's funny in this day and age, right, where we've made a lot of progress, societally, culturally, in a lot of ways. But the fact of the matter is that even in our progress, when it comes to everything from identity to cultures, race, etc., it's still a visual storytelling medium. So even in a moment where it's not so much about your looks, it might not be about judging one way what a good look is versus a bad look, but it's still a visual storytelling medium. So you have to understand what story your look tells. That's a bizarrely personal thing to have to really think through. But then also, here's a difficult question. When you created Theater Art Life, for example, whether you asked yourself this specific question or not, you essentially identified a quote unquote problem in the marketplace. What can we solve? What there needs to be a better resource for a more diverse body of makers, right? I mean, again, I'm putting words in your mouth of what you decided, but that's what any business does. What problem do I solve? And this is another way that's difficult to objectify ourselves. But again, if we're running a business, we're asking people to pay us for services. It's because we are essentially, hopefully, solving a problem for them. Do we know what that is? That is a tough question for especially performing artists, because we all want to be interpretive and our core talent should just sort of float and make us unique and special in all of our projects. But these are all amorphous, intangible ideas, when what's actually happening, our talent agents, casting directors, producers are looking at us and going, oh, that person has this unique talent, or this person has a big enough following, right? In terms of following.
Oh, I'm going to ask you about that next. That was my very next question. So sorry, keep going, but that's my next question.
No, you get it. It's a good segue. Yeah. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. But I'm really interested in your thoughts, and I think that's self-promotion. I have heard stories and from people, dancers particularly, who have been selected for roles over others based on their Instagram following. And so for me, that's insane to start with. I mean, I'm a true believer personally that the market's going to go where the market goes. And you can either play in the game or you don't. And you can either have a successful career without much self-promotion, or you could have a career based on your self-promotion. I don't think there's a right way to run about it, but I do wonder what your thoughts are, and also what you talk with your clients about that self-marketing and building a following, and even how they present themselves.
Before I answer specifically, let me just say this about pretty much any element of what it means to run a creative business, including marketing or self-promotion. Again, I don't think about self-promotion, as much as we're marketing a product. And I won't go
Which
too
happens
much
to be
into
yourself.
It, exactly. But I actually am a big believer in marketing a persona. I say that. I said, if we're going to create a story about you, it's inspired by, but it's for public consumption. So the same way that Tom Cruise or Kathy Najimy, or we might see personas, but I feel confident that they hold on to some semblance of their own private life for those closest to them. I say that because obviously we work with a lot of early career developmental artists who don't have big followings per se, and yet they need to begin to consider themselves public figures in order to, I think, to depersonalize a bit. But in terms of this idea of followership, let me say this: there's a lot of talent in the world. I believe I am a uniquely gifted actor who can bring a lot to the table. I think I can do things other people cannot do. I do believe in my own abilities, but that doesn't really mean much, because While that could be helpful for me, there are many, many versions of me. And so I sort of look at it this way, to take your dancer, example. If you have two artists, an actor, dancer, singer, whatever it is, up for a show, and they're probably fairly comparable, given how competitive the marketplace truly is. If one has 11,000 followers on Instagram and one has 892, why would I not choose, in a day and age where, per your point about us being self-promoters, everybody is a bit of a walking billboard? Why would I, as a producer, not go, well, when this person posts about this project they're working on, they might sell me a few hundred more tickets? Now, we might not like that, but let's just, social media, Mike Labadius says this, and it really has always hit me. On social media, you're either selling or being sold. I really don't think there's an in-between. I think you are either playing into the capitalistic system that is this massive money-making device and using it for your own benefit, or you're falling prey to exactly what we want us to fall prey to, which is comparison, which is, thinking that we're actually engaging with our friends when in fact we're posting content because we are aware of how we're perceived. And I'm just being quite blunt, Anna, because this is an important question. And I want to also say something about this, that I'm sure you hear this too. I work with people who are legitimate influencers with monetized YouTube channels and blue checks and all of that, down to the pish of nobodies. Is this? I play a lot of Jewish managers these days, and that keeps coming up.
I love it.
Who have no followers, and everybody hates social media. Everybody hates it. Everybody hates being involved in it. Everybody hates the way it makes them feel. But you actually are just said a few minutes ago, it's like, well, so we can either choose to play the game and to our own advantage, or we can let it eat us a bit. And I'm not sure if that really answers your question, but to me, what it leaves me with is this. If I do not engage with the idea of, dare we say, relevancy as it relates to followership specifically and growing a base, do I understand the ramifications from a business standpoint? Again, this idea of selling or being sold. If I depersonalize, this is not for my Aunt Rita or my cousin Lucinda. This is really as a tool for me to engage with my persona, to continue to cultivate a creative career, then I think the perspective does shift. And I will just say personally, I am not a doom scroller. I cannot spend a lot of time on social media. It feels like a waste of time for me. I do not go on there and scroll endlessly. That's just a parameter I use for myself to understand, well, I know if I'm doing that, I'm just being sold. Does that answer your question at all? What are your thoughts?
It does. I'm kind of the same ilk, there's no right answer. And I think that's what you've kind of explained in that sense. There's many ways to approach it, and you play the game or you don't play the game, and nobody likes social media, right? I mean, my Instagram reel feed is full of cat videos that I watch with my kids. That's about that's the extent of
you've been sold on cat videos. That's
I
what
totally
you bought.
It's when your kids are preteen and you need to find a way to connect with them, cat videos is a good bridge. And I'm just putting it out there. And we sit down for like 5 minutes, maybe every couple of days or whatever. And they're like, can we watch some reels? Because my kids are not allowed to have social media or anything. So they don't have 11 and 9. So they don't have any accounts or they don't have any. They're just not involved in that, which is an easy thing to do in Hong Kong, to be honest, because it's not a big. It's much different. It's different from culture to culture, but it's very easy to keep digital stuff out of people's hands here. So, but we do indulge in that. So I agree. I mean, the biggest and the most hardest thing for me when I started Theatre Art Life was to realise how much that would put me in the public realm. And actually, more than starting the business, more than starting my own product, more than the idea of all of that, the thing that I feared the most was that, being public. Now I've learned to be comfortable in that space, hence me running podcasts and being on webinars and getting up for speaking engagements. But it's not my nature. It's not the desire for me to be out there promoting myself personally, But I realized that the only way to be an advocate for my product was to put a face behind that product. And so it's the same as anybody, I think, in any industry of the entertainment industry. You need to be an advocate for what you're doing. And that is in the social media space, because that's where a lot of people live, right? So you need to be out there. And that's what I've learned by attrition in starting this business. And it's been a very uncomfortable journey for me over the last 5 years. I'm now in a very comfortable place, but the first few years was really something that I had to grow into, for sure.
This is, you're not speaking to this exactly, but it's going to go back to the marketing piece. Any brand, Nike, the window store down the street, ideally they're personal. There's a personal touch to any brand, to your point about you needing to be out there, because Theater Art Life alone, yes, it provides a valuable resource, but people want to connect with the person. Getting back to artists for a second, this idea of a persona, this is not only true, but a lot of another unique challenge when it comes to performing artists is that, unlike the window store that can post all about their windows and unique ways to tell that story, we also have to, I often specific to actors, de-actorify our content, meaning there's a, okay, here's what I do. You can kind of see me do my acting work. Isn't that cool? But then also here's all about me, because it's this balance as an artist where people want to see the person as well. And how do you create boundaries there in the and that's why, again, this idea of persona is so important to me. It's not about a falsehood. It's just that my partner, my mother, my best friends, these people can see me, can have all of me, but the public cannot. That is not, and I'm a nobody. I'm a Pisha nobody. It doesn't, like, no one knows who I am, but there are enough people, whether it's through my work as an actor or through artist strategy, that will follow me and my, who I am. And I've got to sort of be clear, though, about how I share elements of my personal life as part of my quote unquote persona, while also, playing the game of not being too actory on socials, which again is just another crazy element of our industry that we have got to also dance around marketing in this unique way, as well as to protect myself, if that makes any sense.
Draw that line. Yeah, no, absolutely. You've got to decide where that line is drawn, right? And
yes.
And preserve some part of you to yourself, because I think if you're putting everything out there, I mean, I just sometimes I follow some yoga people just for some like yoga moves and stuff when I need to be inspired, and something I'll look up and they'll give me some extra vocabulary that I might work towards. And when that's all they do, I mean, they're doing it every day and they're pushing out all of it, I just think, oh God, that must be exhausting.
Yes.
There's days where you don't want to do yoga, but you've got to put out that yoga video every single day, and it seems if that's your job and you're earning a business in that realm, well, that's a whole nother level. I think that's dedication,
especially when it's based on you. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So we've got a few more minutes left, so I'm going to ask the same two questions we ask all our podcast guests, and it starts with, what is your most favorite thing about your job or the industry?
So it's funny, dovetailing off of this idea of being a persona, quote unquote. I've also been a very independent person for a long time. I ran a theater company for about 7 years, production company before that. And I say all that because I've often found myself in situations, again with artist strategy too, where I'm either leading or having to be responsible for others and put on a game face to some extent. And Anna, at the end of the day, my work as an artist, the reason I will never stop acting, and I get that question a lot because I've produced a bunch, and how important is it for me is the one spot where I am able to just be myself, where it is my job to not be right, where it is my job to not be in control, and I cannot tell you how invaluable that is for me, and what a part of my identity and self-expression, which it is for many people. That's not revelatory, but that at the end of the day is what I love most. Those brief moments, whether it's for 2.5 hours a night, or I'm learning to find more joy in my auditions, and more creativity, more, this is my moment to do that. This isn't about getting a job, but to do the thing that allows me to express myself. So that's what I love most about it.
Your space to play.
My space to play. That's right.
That's awesome. I really like that answer. The other one is, if you could change one thing about the job or your industry, what would it be?
Oh my gosh. That's a tough question for me. because there's so much, Anna.
You're like, don't make it one thing. Can we make it a list?
I'm going to speak a little opaquely, but maybe you'll help me parse it out. Which is, I feel like we are gaslit a lot in this industry. I feel like we are made to believe that whether it's agents or managers or producers or everybody else has the power over us specifically as performing artists. And I believe there's a scarcity mindset, an inability for people to speak their truths a lot of times because everyone just is so afraid of or stepping out of line. No one wants to take some independent moves for themselves. They don't want to piss off their agents. And so again, while it's not concrete, that's the thing I wish would change. I wish freelance artists lived in a culture where a sense of independence or entrepreneurialism was truly valued in a way that would allow us to improve the industry communally, to make it healthier economically, culturally, so that ultimately we all have a true fair chance. I mean, I don't want to go down too much of his path, but I'll say one of the most difficult things of running artist strategy for me is if I'm going to speak quite candidly, when I work with someone who I realize, going back to our question about can you develop a sense of entrepreneurialism, when I realize that it's probably not going to happen for them, not definitely, anything can happen, of course, it's not my job to say that, but when you see that they're not willing to put in that work or don't have that natural resilient spirit, when I go, this isn't probably going to happen for them. And that is very difficult for me because it's not just their fault. It's a byproduct of us being in an industry that does not highlight the necessity to be an entrepreneur and truly understand what that means. Does that answer make sense?
It does. And I want to sort of bounce off that and say I don't think that is purely etched out for just the performer realm. I think that same is for technicians in the freelance realm, and they have the same problems of there's no one to advocate for them, right? There's no freelancer union, especially on a global scale. And so therefore they're left to fend for themselves. And a lot of them will, even take for me, I when I started out, I just took any work I could, right? There was not a lot of general of like personal driving my bus through my career for the first 10 years. I was taking the gigs I could get. And I think where there's a lot to be said about universities, actually, who train people in the arts. There should be a business facet of their arts education, because a lot of people have said to me, literally through the pandemic, when I did a lot of webinars, I wish I had been taught how to be a freelancer. I wish I would have been taught how to manage my business stuff. I wish I would have been taught how to do my tax return, right? Like, all of these things as a freelancer are very complex, because you are your own business, and you start out being the most capable technician, but on the back end, you've got no tools to manage yourself as a business. And that is a failing, I think, of tertiary institutions, not just in America, but everywhere.
I say the same thing, that I think it's we are making irresponsible decisions as early as these training programs. And I've made to that 2 points. One is that what surprises most people is that, specifically with artist strategy, our key base are between 30 and 50 years old. They are not people who are just starting out. And the reason they're not people starting out is because the people who are in their early 20s often are still in the luck, the fantasy, But to your point, imagine freshman year. What does it mean to be an entrepreneur? What does it mean to be a creative entrepreneur? What is financial management? How do you build relationships? How do you market effectively? What if that was baked in to especially conservatory training? You would have these creative entrepreneurial soldiers everywhere, vying for themselves and creating more work and more opportunities for others, producing. I mean, it would be a completely different landscape. And per your point, or what I think is your point, I believe there's a responsibility to really consider that. Trust me, I'm talking to universities, and to be 100%, Anna, the reason they don't buy in is because it's not what the people who are paying their bills want. They want the fantasy element of so much of this, that it's just going to sort of continue to flow and grow by itself, which is wild to me.
You know what? I could speak to you for the next 4 hours, Josh.
I know.
Let's do part 2 at some point in the next 6 months. Because there's more we need to talk about. I really appreciate you joining us today, and I'm so thankful that we finally got to speak again, and I hope to catch up with you in person soon. So thank you for being on the podcast.
Likewise. Thanks for having me.
Theatre Art Life is a global media site for entertainment. Memberships start at only $38 per year. You can have unlimited access to our daily published articles, including entertainment news and the writings of active industry professionals, ensuring that you are always up to date on the global happenings in the world of entertainment. Become a part of the international entertainment community and join us now at www.theatreartlife.com.